us something interesting. They say that the human beings and other forms of life were created during the reign of Swayambhuva Manu. So the Swayambhuva Manvantar is the first Manvantar. It extends from about 1.7 billion to 2 billion years ago. And according to the Puranas, humans were present on Earth at that time. And they've been here continuously since that time up to the seventh Manvantar, and they will continue for the next seven Manvantar periods. The Puranas even give specific examples of personalities who lived during the first Manvantar of the current Kalpa or day of Brahma. They included, for example, Dhruva Maharaj, who many of you know was a boy who went to the forest, to the jungle to find God. He met the sage Narada Muni, who told him to chant and meditate upon a certain mantra at a place called Madhuvan Forest near the town of Mathura in northern India. So if you go there today, you will still see temples commemorating these events, which took place about 2 billion years ago on this planet. For example, on the hill called the Dhruva Tila in the Madhavan forest, there's this temple with images of Dhruva, Narada, and Vishnu. And actually, if you travel throughout India, you will find hundreds and thousands of places and sacred places and sacred cities and sacred temples that commemorate events that took place millions and millions of years ago on this planet. So, according to the Puranas, according to the Vedic histories, humans have always been around. And we sort of expect that if scientists, they send a space station into outer space, they don't just hope that somehow or other the chemicals in the space station will combine to produce human beings that will eventually become astronauts. No, the astronauts go right when the space station is constructed, right from the beginning. So our Earth is like that. It's got a purpose. It's to educate the souls that find themselves in the world of matter and give them the opportunity for self-realization. So that opportunity can be carried out in the human form of life, which has always been available for conscious selves in this universe. So modern science tells us something completely different. They say, well, the first humans like us came into existence less than 300,000 years ago. And they would say, before that, there were no human beings like us. There were just more primitive, ape-like human ancestors. But, we may ask, I mean, for myself, a statement from the Puranas is sufficient, but we may still ask, is there any evidence that humans like us have been present on Earth for more than 300,000 years? Depends upon what you consider to be evidence. I consider a statement from the Puranas to be evidence, but I can't go to an archaeology conference and expect scientists to immediately accept a statement from the Puranas as evidence. They want to know, what about the archaeological discoveries? Is there any evidence on that basis that humans have been around for a long time? So at some of the scientific institutions and conferences that I've attended, I've spoken about these things. And I tell them, if what the Puranas say is true, there should be reports of archaeological evidence for humans existing much further back in time than 200 or 300,000 years, perhaps going many millions of years. And my finding was actually there are many reports of such things in the scientific literature, past and present. And I've collected those reports in this book, co authored with Richard Thompson, Sataputta Das, uh, called Forbidden Archaeology. And a question arises, if this evidence really is there in the scientific literature, why isn't it in today's textbooks? And I believe that's because of a process of knowledge filtration that operates in the world of science. We can call the blue box the knowledge filter. Some people might call it a paradigm. It represents the dominant consensus about a particular question in a scientific discipline. And, this term paradigm was popularized by the philosopher of science Thomas Kuhn in his book, famous book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. And he pointed out that in the absence of a paradigm, all the facts could be considered equally. But once you have a paradigm, then you start separating things out. And basically, it works like this: the reports of evidence that conform to the paradigm, to the dominant consensus, pass through this intellectual filter. But reports that radically contradict the dominant consensus are filtered out, which means they're forgotten, set aside, sometimes dismissed on very flimsy grounds. So I've resurrected this evidence in this book. And even after the book was published, more cases came to my attention. That book, Forbidden Archaeology, was first published in 1993. But even in more recent times, these discoveries continue to be made, although they may not be recognized for what they really are. In 2013, archaeologists discovered footprints in the United Kingdom at a place called Happisburgh. And, they carefully measured these footprints and they found they were exactly like those of living populations of anatomically modern humans. But they were found in layers of rock about 800,000 years old. So they thought, well, human beings like us didn't exist 800,000 years ago. They haven't evolved yet. So who did exist at that time? They think there was an ape man they called Homo antecessor. So they attributed the footprints to this species. A similar case, even more recently from 2015, some archaeologists were working at Olduvai Gorge in the country of Tanzania in East Africa, and they found a human-like finger bone in layers of rock 1,840,000 years old. And this was the finger bone that they found. And they carefully measured it and studied it. They compared it through multivariate statistical analysis with the same finger bone of different species of apes and monkeys, like the chimpanzees, gorillas, macacas, baboons. They compared it to the same finger bone in various species of hominins, alleged human ancestors, like the Neanderthals, the Homo erectus type, the Australopithecus type. And they also compared it to anatomically modern human finger bones. And they found that this finger bone, which they labeled technically the OH86 finger bone, they found it fit squarely in the modern human group, different from any kind of ape or monkey or other hominin species. So they actually wrote in their report, uh, which you can see there, I'll translate it into more simple English, that this finger bone is exactly like that of modern Homo sapiens, but we can't call it Homo sapiens because of its geological age of 1.8 million years. So that's how this process of knowledge filtration operates. You know, the evidence can be staring scientists in the face and they just won't recognize it for what it really is. There's no reason why we can't say that OH86 should be assigned to Homo sapiens and be given an age of 1.84 million years. In 1979, Mary Leakey announced the discoveries of footprints at another place in Tanzania called Laetoli. And in her original report, she said these footprints are indistinguishable from modern human footprints. Other scientists also agreed. Paleontologist Tim White wrote, "Make no mistake about it, they are like modern human footprints." Now, neither Tim White nor Mary Leakey believe that humans like us made the footprints. So how did they explain these footprints? Well, they said 4 million years ago, because that's the age of the formation in which they were found, about 4 million years. They said 4 million years ago, there must have been some species of Australopithecus or some other creature like that who had feet exactly like modern human feet. And that's how the footprints were made. Now, that's an interesting proposal, but there isn't any real scientific evidence to support it. Scientists have discovered the foot bones of Australopithecus, which is the ape man like creature they think existed at that time. And the foot structure of Australopithecus is not like that of a modern human being. It's more like the foot of a chimpanzee, which has a big toe that can move out to the side like the human thumb, and long toes, sort of like human fingers. Actually, the only creature known to science today that has a foot exactly like a modern human foot is human beings like ourselves. So, what did Mary Leakey actually find? I think she found evidence that humans like us were existing 4 million years ago in Africa. Now, some people might say, okay, maybe the footprints are a little bit ambiguous. It would be better if you had some reports of human skeletons 4 million years old or some other type of evidence. And there, well, there are some footprints that are even older than that, like at a site in Crete in 2017, just a couple of years ago. A researcher announced the discovery of footprints in layers of rock almost 6 million years old. And these footprints, according to the discoverer, had many human like features. The toes were short, like human toes. The first toe is larger than the others. It doesn't move out to the side. Uh, so the footprints were human like and about 6 million years old. And again, they tried to explain them by saying, no, 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 humans like us did not exist at that time. They were probably made by Ardipithecus ramidus. But if you look at their descriptions of uh, Ardipithecus, and look at their feet, you find they're not like the footprints that you see there in the formation in Crete. They're more or less like chimpanzee hands with that big toe that moves out to the side. So in in this picture, we see the Ophir silver mine in Virginia City, Nevada. And in the late 19th century, an anatomically modern human skull cap was found there. According to the original reports, it came from about 300 feet below the surface and came out in a cart that was bringing out some of the silver ore. The skull from the Ophir mine came to the attention of Dr. J.D. Whitney, who had it brought to San Francisco for study. The skull was reported to the scientific world by Dr. James Blake at a meeting of the California Academy of Sciences. So the silver ore at the Ophir mine belongs to the Comstock lode. And according to modern geologists, that formation is about 14 million years old. So it appears that the Ophir skull from Nevada is about 14 million years old. This is an interesting discovery. Uh, it's not a scientifically reported discovery, but I found it interesting nevertheless from the standpoint of Vedic culture. In 1944, a young boy, maybe about 10 years old, Newton R. Anderson, was putting some coal into a coal burning stove that was a furnace that was used to heat his family's house in Buckhannon, West Virginia. And there was a big piece of coal, too big to put in, so he broke it in half. And inside, he found this bell solidly embedded in the block of coal. And it's kind of interesting. He was from a Christian background, so he really couldn't interpret it. But when I look at it, I see it's exactly like temple bells that are used in our temples today, in different Hindu temples and Vaishnav temples in India and throughout the diaspora. It's the figure of Garuda, who is the winged carrier of Vishnu. So that coal is about 300 million years old, according to modern geologists, the coal that object came from. So it's kind of interesting that the Puranas, the Vedic histories, say that long ago, millions of years ago, in previous yugas and manvantars, Vedic culture was spread all over the world. So I could keep you here for a long time going through one case after another because I've just given a few. There are actually hundreds of these cases in the scientific literature. And I could keep you here from now until the 4th of July, going through one case after another. But what are the implications of this? One implication of this evidence for extreme human antiquity is that there is no prehistoric. Prehistoric means before there was anybody to record and witness events in human society. According to the Vedic civilization, according to the Puranas, there's always been human like intelligence. There have always been sages who have recorded human events. So it's interesting. Um, Another thing that's interesting is that these discoveries contradict the modern scientific picture of human origins, which tells us we're just beings made of molecules, we're machines made of molecules that have somehow or other accidentally come into existence in an accidental universe. And when the chemicals in the brain that produce consciousness, according to their ideas, become disorganized at the time of death, everything's finished. That's it. This evidence indicates we need new explanations for human origins, and these new explanations are consciousness based, not matter based. So, the purpose of human life is to elevate consciousness to the Sanatan level, the level beyond the cycle of birth and death, which is called samsara. And that's the actual purpose of yoga and meditation, to allow us to do that. And there are many practices that the spiritual culture of ancient India, of the Vedic culture, give us. One of them being mantra meditation, which is practiced as part of the bhakti yoga system. So I follow that system and I spend time each day meditating upon this mantra, the Hare Krishna mantra. So I I have some books that I've written on these topics. There are some of them, and my most recent book is called My Science, My Religion. It's a collection of 24 papers that I've presented on these topics at international scientific conferences. So if anyone wants to learn how I present these things in scientific circles, they could have a look at that book. Uh, Before that, I published a book called Human Devolution, a Vedic Alternative to Darwin's Theory, involving consciousness, as I was speaking about. After people read my book, Forbidden Archaeology, they asked me a question. Okay, they said, okay, you've got all this evidence that contradicts the current evolutionary theories of human origins. So, what are you going to propose in its place? So, to answer that question, I wrote the book Human Devolution, a Vedic Alternative to Darwin's Theory. So, if you're interested in that, you could have a look at that. And this is some of my contact information. And on my website, mcremo.com, I've got a special offer that if people purchase from the website my most recent book, My Science, My Religion, they'll also have an opportunity, if they desire it, to receive a free copy of Bhagavad Gita. So I wanted to leave some time for discussion, and I see that we do have it. I didn't want to take up, all of the time just speaking. I'd like to hear the thoughts of any of any of the any of you who have come this evening, so we can open it up for questions and comments.
Well, I want to say, first of all, it was an amazing presentation, so much information. I really appreciate that. I have one question, and then I'm sure Raj may have a couple more. And this is something that, in my own simple way of researching, it's been a question in my mind. Was the human species brought here, meaning brought to this earth, or was it developed over time from a process like evolution? Does that make sense?
That is an excellent question. Uh, from my standpoint, looking at it from my study of the Vedic literature as received through the line of gurus that I was initiated into, uh, it it's something that has been in the mind of God eternally. Because we have to consider that according to the Vedic cosmology, the human beings have existed not just on this planet, in this universe. According to the Vedic cosmology, there are millions of universes. And in each of these millions and millions, uncounted millions of universes, the human form of life has been there. And even on even within this universe, it's been there for a long, long time. According to the Vedic cosmology, this universe came into existence about 150 trillion years ago.
Wow.
And and as I said, there's not just one universe, there's many universes, an uncounted number of universes. And in all of them, the human form of life is there, and the opportunity to use that human form of life has always been there. That opportunity to use the human form of life to elevate consciousness has always been there. Like the Rig Veda says, Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Now that we have the human form of life, it it's we should use it. Now there is a kind of evolution, but it's not the kind that Darwin spoke about. It's an evolution of the conscious self, the Atma, the soul, through the different forms of life, the different kinds of bodily vehicles. And among all the different kinds of material bodily vehicles that the soul inhabits, some are plant bodies, some are animal bodies, and then having evolved through all the different kinds of bodies, the human body is a special one which can be used for dual purpose. It can be used to become more and more deeply entangled in trying to selfishly dominate, control, and exploit material resources and other people and other living things for one's own egotistical desires, or it can be used to understand I'm a being of pure consciousness, you're a being of pure consciousness, we're all beings of pure consciousness. Let's satisfy our material needs in the most simple, natural, and efficient and fair way possible while putting most of our human energy into developing the resource of consciousness, the highest stage of which is to live in conscious, loving harmony with the source of all conscious beings and every other conscious being without dividing ourselves up into so many competing groups on the basis of superficial identification with aspects of our material vehicles, whatever they happen to be. So, so there is a kind of evolution, but it's not an evolution of the bodily types according that we see being promoted today, there is an evolution of consciousness through the different types of bodies.
Thank you. That was so wonderful. Appreciate it. Raj?
Um, so Michael Creamer, you spoke of the mainstream science filtering out these important discoveries because they don't fit in with the scheme of Darwin's theory of evolution. But now over time of finding these discoveries, have they changed? Are they beginning to accept it? Or are they still rejected? Or where are we at on that?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I think they're making progress, taking tiny steps in the right direction. When I was doing the research for forbidden archaeology in the late 1980s and the early 1990s, as I said, the book was first published in 1993. At that time, most scientists thought human beings had been around for 100,000 years. And then by about the year 2000 or so, going on from there, they began to think human beings look now like they've been around for about 200,000 years. And then now, 2020, they appear to think, okay, maybe humans have been around 300,000 years, kind of based on some discoveries of skeletal remains in Morocco a couple of years ago. So they're kind of taking little steps in the right direction. And there's also been a development in which many scientists working in this field, archaeology and anthropology, have come to understand that their worldview, their science has been used to suppress other worldviews in 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 Africa and Asia and other parts of the world, especially during what's called the colonial period, when they were militarily and politically dominating other countries, other nations, other peoples. And they're becoming open to hearing more about what these other civilizations and worldviews thought about these questions. So that's another positive development. So it's interesting. Yes, I could say yes. There are some openings. There is some improvement. It's scientists in that category, the ones that are open to other perspectives on human origins and antiquity, that have allowed me to speak at major international scientific universities, conferences, scientific institutions. So that's another positive development. However, there is, although that's an influential part of the modern world of science, there still are many scientists who are very committed to what we might call a reductionist, or sometimes it's called positivist, or some other term, view of the world that is very much hostile to these sorts of things. And so yes, there are some positive developments that I've seen, but still a long way to go.
Excellent. I have another quick question. Roger, are there questions in the chat so far?
I'm not seeing any right now.
Okay, I want to ask Michael Cremo about this. Again, it's something that I've been thinking about for many, many years, trying to get some clarity on. And I had to write it down because it's a little convoluted. But in the Vedas, as presented by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, it is mentioned that there is 8,400,000 species of life, with 400,000 species of human life. So the question is, are the different races on the earth, are they different species?
According to the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a verse where it's stated in the Sanskrit that the humans on Earth are all of one species. So I kind of take it like that. But we have to realize that according to the Vedic cosmology, this one planet that we are on now is not the only place that human-like beings exist in the cosmos. For example, I was reading some passages in the 8th canto and 9th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam where beings such as the Guyakas and the Apsaras and other human-like beings that exist on other planets and other dimensions of the universe are also called human. Srila Prabhupada has said that Brahma, the first created being in the universe, the demigod who was responsible for engineering the structure of the different planetary systems and for using bejas or seeds provided by God, by Krishna, to manifest the forms of different types of bodies for the use of the conditioned souls in this universe. They're all considered human. And that's one of the points that I always tried to get across on Ancient Aliens when I was being invited onto that show, that according to the Vedic cosmology, there are 400,000 human-like species scattered throughout the entire universe. So I will, however, say that I don't have a monopoly on Vedic knowledge. That's why I call my particular point of view a Vedic perspective, not the Vedic perspective. But I think anyone offering a Vedic perspective will hopefully do so on the basis of the statements of the Vedas as they've been received through a genuine line of teachers.
Excellent.
I have a question, if nobody else has. This is Vijay. What is the significance of the discoveries in Rocky Gadi in India? You have any?
Yes, the discoveries in Rocky Gadi were made by, of course, by Indian archaeologists working in concert with some international archaeologists. And the most significant thing is that they found some human skeletal remains from a woman who lived maybe 6,000 or 7,000 years ago. And they were able to recover some DNA from the skeletal remains. And that's very unusual for India because of the tropical climate, the hot weather. It generally degrades DNA in human fossil remains very quickly. So to be able to recover some DNA, some ancient DNA from that time period was very interesting. And they found that the DNA in that ancient woman was very similar genetically to the current populations, especially in northern India. So this tended to show that she had not migrated in from elsewhere. And, that reflects on a question that has long troubled many archaeologists, both in India and throughout the world. And that is the question of the origin of Vedic culture, the origin of the people who brought in Sanskrit and other aspects of the Vedic culture. Were they native to the subcontinent that we now have, names for the different divisions of, but or did they come from outside? So, from the standpoint of everyone, of many scientists, particularly in the West, from the time of the British rule in India up to the present, they've had the idea that it came from the Vedic culture, the Vedic people came from elsewhere. So this Rakhigarhi discovery, Rakhigarhi is considered to be part of what's sometimes called the Harappan civilization or the Indus civilization, or by some, the Saraswati, Indus Saraswati civilization. So it's a key discovery that makes use of some of the latest science, the study of ancient DNA, which has revolutionized archaeology within the past 10 years. So it's a very important discovery. And what would help is if additional discoveries could be made with more recovery of ancient DNA from skeletal remains found in that part of the world, which is Haryana and other provinces or states in what's now western India.
I have a question here from.
Thank you, Michael D. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was a very good question.
Michael Cremo. I have a question here from Paul Nehart. He said, he said he's been a fan of yours since the days in Atlantis Rising magazine, but he has a question. He says, I've had a fascination with the Kalash people of Pakistan and their spiritual beliefs. Is there anything in their lore that we can learn about the real history of Earth? I'm aware that their lore is connected with ancient Hindu teachings, or am I wrong?
I'll have to say I don't know, because I've never really studied this is the first I've heard of this particular group of people and their culture and worldview. So I'm not afraid to say when I don't know anything about a particular topic. I'd be happy to hear more from you about them, or where I could find out more about these people and give you an answer when I've had the opportunity to look into the question. But I'd rather do it that way than just try to invent something to bluff my way into giving some kind of answer for you, other than the true answer. At this moment, I don't know.
Paul Nehart said, thank you. It's hard to find much on them. I have another question here from Ravi Vijayanath. He says, has there been any archaeological evidence of human remains / existence with more than 2 hands or heads or such unusual additional limbs?
In terms of archaeological evidence, I can't think of anything right at the moment. However, from medical studies, I did have some experience with that idea. Once I was presenting a paper at a meeting of a group called, it was about this, for the study of consciousness. There was a group of scientists and researchers who were into consciousness studies. So I had gone there to present a paper about famous scientists who have investigated different paranormal phenomena that are kind of consistent with the worldview that we see described in the Puranas and other Vedic texts. So I was at the conference, I was speaking with a medical doctor, and we were discussing the phenomenon of phantom limbs. And this medical doctor told me, because phantom limbs means a person may be born without an arm or a leg, or maybe was a soldier who lost an arm or leg in warfare, or a person who's undergone an automobile accident. Many of these people report that even though the limb is gone, they still feel it, and they can even feel pain. Like a pin stuck in their finger, but their finger's not there. It's the whole arm is gone. So the phenomenon is called phantom limbs. And I was speaking about this with this medical doctor, and he said to me, once I had the occasion where a person reported to me, when they were born, that they felt they had an extra pair of arms and hands, that they had, in addition to their own two limbs, they had phantom additional arms, two phantom additional arms, giving them a total of 4. So I thought, well, that's really interesting. It sounds like the Narayan form of Vishnu, 4-arm form, which the residents of the Vaikuntha planets and the spiritual world have.
We don't have any questions yet.
Anyone here on the Zoom have a question? Any of our participants that are on the Zoom?
Oh, Ravi Vaidyanathan said thanks, Michael Cremo, for replying to him.
Thank you, Ravi.
Okay. So if we don't have any more questions, then I just want to say thank you so much, Michael Cremo, Druta Karma Prabhu, for your presentation. So it's exciting me as the president of VFA to think, how can we bring you back again and cover some other topics? We talked maybe about the ancient alien aspect and different things like that. So we're going to definitely reach out to you and see if we can schedule another time that you can come. And
Okay.
we're so thankful for your support of VFA, your participation over the years. And again, on behalf of the whole VFA team and also our participants this evening, just want to say thank you. And Hare Krishna, Hare Bol, Namaste. And Namaste to everyone who came on the call. Really appreciate you all very much. Take care. Have a wonderful evening. Take care.
Om Tat Sat.